I wasn't supposed to hear any of it. I had been sitting at my desk, eyes focused on the endless rows of numbers in my open spreadsheets, when my phone rang. My father's name popped up on the screen. Dad, a word that once felt full of warmth, but lately, it felt like a chain I couldn't escape. I picked up the call. "Hey, Dad." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. At first, I thought the connection had dropped, but then I heard faint sounds in the background. Someone shifting in a chair, the scrape of it against the floor, and a sigh before his voice came through. "She's a failure. She'll never succeed." A wave of nausea washed over me, and I froze in place, the phone still pressed to my ear. Then, my mother's voice cut in, quieter, but just as sharp. "She's fine. She pays the mortgage, doesn't she?" My father scoffed. "That's the least she can do after everything we've done for her. You think I'm proud of her? She was a mistake that should have never happened, a constant disappointment. And she thinks she's successful? She'll never be more than a joke." A mistake. A joke. The words hit me like 1,000 razor blades. My throat went dry, and my fingers tightened around the phone, a painful grip I couldn't release. I wanted to hang up, scream at him, but I couldn't move. My body was frozen, my breath caught in my chest. "She's lucky we even let her be part of this family," my father continued. "I don't know why she even bothers trying so hard. She'll never be one of us." And then it hit me. He hadn't meant to call me. He'd forgotten to hang up. That was when the call ended. The silence in my apartment was deafening. My heart raced, so loud it felt like it would burst through my ribs. I sat there for a long time, staring blankly at the empty air around me. For 6 years, I had been quietly paying their mortgage. They thought the payments were going to the bank, but in reality, I was the one who had been keeping a roof over their heads. Through JSC Holdings, the investment company I set up with my financial advisor's help, I bought their mortgage from the bank after they almost lost the house. They never read the fine print. They had no clue. They were living under my kindness, my silent sacrifice. And now, I understood. They would never have cared. My entire life, I had bent over backward, trying to earn my father's approval. I worked harder than anyone else, climbed higher in my career, earned more than he ever did. But it was never enough. It would never be enough. But this moment? This was the one that changed everything. I took a slow, steady breath, my hands calm as I reached for my laptop. I opened the folder with the mortgage documents, the payment schedule, the ownership papers. My father thought I was a failure, that I was worthless. But in 1 week, he was going to learn exactly who he had been relying on all these years. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there, wide-eyed, staring at the ceiling, my father's words ringing in my mind like a broken record. She was a mistake that should have never happened. It wasn't just the insult. It was the conviction in his voice. The certainty he spoke with, like it wasn't even up for debate, as if my existence itself had been a burden. I should have been used to it. My father had never been one to offer praise. Even when I was a child, I had to fight for his approval. Straight A's? Never good enough. Promotions? Expected. Buying my first house? A waste of money. No matter what I did, it was dismissed or criticized. Yet, through it all, I clung to one fragile hope, that maybe, just maybe, if I worked hard enough, I could change his mind. That hope died the moment I heard that call. By morning, I was done with feeling hurt. Done with feeling anything. I dragged myself out of bed, brewed a strong cup of black coffee, and sat down at my desk. The cold glow of the laptop screen reflected in my tired eyes as I opened the folder marked JSC Holdings, property number 12, my parents' house. The mortgage they thought they were paying was actually under my name. The bank had transferred it to JSC Holdings years ago when they were on the brink of losing the house. Back then, my mother had called, crying, begging for help. My father had refused, too proud to admit defeat. But I stepped in. I set up the perfect plan. They thought they were making payments to the bank, but in truth, every check they sent went straight to my LLC. I had been covering most of the costs, 6 years of paying thousands every month to keep them comfortable. Never once asking for a thank you. Never once expecting them to grovel. But I had expected the basic decency that anyone would offer. I clicked through the documents, my hands steady as I reviewed the fine print. When I first set up the mortgage buyout, David, my financial advisor, had insisted on including a purchase option clause, a safety net in case things went wrong. At the time, I had laughed. What could possibly go wrong? Now, I wasn't laughing. If they missed a payment, JSC Holdings had the right to seize full ownership of the house, immediately. They would become month-to-month tenants, and if they couldn't pay rent, I could evict them. They had no idea how much control I actually had. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of it all sink in. My father had thought I was a failure, that I was nothing, but he had been living under my roof this entire time. A bitter smile curved my lips. I had the power to take everything from them. The only question was, did they deserve it? As if on cue, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mom. "Hey, sweetheart, can you come over for dinner this Sunday? We'd love to see you." I stared at the screen. The last time she invited me for dinner, it was for one reason: money. I debated ignoring it, but something in my gut told me to play along. If my father could pretend to love me, I could pretend right back. So I typed, "Of course, looking forward to it." A lie, but one I needed to tell. Before I closed my laptop, there was one last thing to check: my uncle. My dad's older brother had always been on my side. He was the only one in the family who had ever treated me like I mattered. I quickly sent him a text. "Hey, Uncle Ray, I need to ask you something. Have you ever heard Dad say anything about me? Anything unusual?" His reply came almost immediately. "Emily, we need to talk. I didn't want to be the one to tell you this, but it's worse than you think." My chest tightened. Worse? What else had they been saying? The phone rang, and I answered on the first ring. "Uncle Ray," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He sighed deeply. "Emily, I've kept quiet for too long, but after what I heard last week, I can't anymore." I braced myself. What did they say? There was a pause, and then his voice came through, thick with concern. "They don't just talk about you behind your back. They've been planning something. Your father, he's been looking into your finances. He's convinced you've been hiding money from them. Last week, he told your mom that if you don't willingly hand over more cash, they'll find a way to force your hand." Blood rushed to my ears. Force my hand? How? "He mentioned calling your employer, trying to discredit you, maybe even contacting the IRS to audit you." A cold, sharp anger settled deep in my gut. They weren't just ungrateful. They weren't just cruel. They were willing to destroy me for money. I took a slow, steady breath, my fingers curling into fists. "Uncle Ray, I need you to do something for me." "Anything, sweetheart. I need proof," I said. I wasn't sure what exactly my parents had planned, but one thing was certain. They thought I was weak. They had no idea who they were dealing with, and in just a few days, they would learn exactly how wrong they were. The next 2 days were spent preparing. If my father wanted to play dirty, I would show him just how dangerous underestimating me could be. First, I called David, my financial advisor. "Emily," he greeted warmly, "I take it this isn't just a social call?" "Not exactly," I replied, tapping my pen against my desk. "I need to know exactly how airtight our agreement is on property number 12. If they miss a payment, how fast can I act?" David didn't even hesitate. "Immediately. The purchase option clause allows JSC Holdings to assume full ownership the second they default. They'll have no legal recourse unless they have $350,000 lying around to buy you out." I smirked. "They don't. Then they're screwed." I exhaled slowly, a sense of control sweeping over me. "Good," I said. "I need you to do one more thing. Watch their account. I have a feeling they're already struggling, and I need confirmation that their next payment will bounce." David chuckled lightly. "That won't take long. From what I see, their balance is dangerously low. If they don't magically find $5,800 by the 15th, they're toast." I glanced at the calendar. That was in 4 days. 4 days until my father, the man who called me a failure, would wake up to realize he had been living on my generosity. 4 days until he would have to beg me for help. And I wasn't going to give it. On Sunday, I drove to my parents' house, acting as if nothing had changed. The sight of their home, the home I owned, filled me with a strange detachment. This place had once been my safe haven, but now it felt like enemy territory. As I walked up the driveway, my mother flung the door open, her face lighting up with fake enthusiasm. "Emily, sweetheart, come in," she beamed. I stepped inside, the scent of garlic and roasted chicken filling the air. My father sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. My mother moved around the table, placing dishes carefully, as though the perfect dinner would somehow soften whatever they were about to ask of me. My brother Ethan leaned back in his chair, smirking. Unlike me, Ethan had never had to struggle for our father's approval. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, despite the fact that he had 0 accomplishments to his name. I took my seat, my face carefully neutral. "Emily?" my father finally spoke, his voice thick with forced warmth. "It's good to see you." I nodded. "You too, Dad." An awkward silence stretched between us before my mother jumped in, her voice overly sweet. "We've been thinking a lot about family lately," she said, reaching across the table for my hand, "and how important it is to support one another in difficult times." I didn't react. "That's true," my father exhaled, as if he were the one making some grand sacrifice. "The truth is, Emily, we need your help." "The mortgage payment this month is a little tight," he added, downplaying the situation. "A little tight?" They were about to default, and he was still brushing it off. "How much do you need?" I asked, pretending I didn't know. My mother hesitated. "We were thinking just an extra $3,000 a month. That should keep us stable." I nearly laughed. They had no idea. I was already paying $5,800 every single month for them, and now they wanted me to throw in another $3,000 on top of it. I set my fork down, tilting my head. "That's a lot of money." "It's nothing compared to what we've done for you," my father shot back, his irritation finally slipping through his forced politeness. "We raised you, we gave you everything. The least you can do is support your family." I held his gaze, my blood running cold. The least I could do? These were the same people who had mocked me, who had called me a failure, and yet they were living under my roof. I took a slow sip of water, carefully masking my emotions. "I'll think about it." My mother sighed in relief. "Oh, sweetheart, thank you. We knew you'd come through for us." I managed a strained smile. They had no idea that in just 3 days, everything would change. That night, David called me. "They defaulted." A surge of satisfaction washed over me at the words. "They what?" I asked, acting as though I didn't know. "They didn't make the mortgage payment," David confirmed. "The funds weren't there. As of midnight tonight, JSC Holdings officially owns the house." I closed my eyes, letting out a slow breath. It was over. The man who had made me feel worthless my entire life was now my tenant. "Do you want to begin the eviction process?" David asked. "Not yet," I replied. I wanted to see how long it would take for them to realize what had happened. I smiled, glancing at the old family photo on my desk, back when I still believed my father was capable of love. "Not yet," I murmured. "Let's see how long they hold on to their illusion of control, because they will break, and this time I won't be there to catch them." 3 days passed, and the silence from my parents was deafening. No calls, no texts, no desperate messages about family unity. Nothing. I knew why they hadn't figured it out yet. They still thought their payment had gone through, still believed everything was fine. They had no clue that the house they called home wasn't theirs anymore. At exactly 9:07 a.m. on Friday, I got the notification. The subject read, "URG, Default Notice, Property Number 12, from JSC Holdings Legal Department." I opened the email, my heart racing with a mix of anticipation and satisfaction. The legal notice was blunt, formal, and irrefutable. Due to failure to submit the agreed-upon mortgage payment by the deadline of the 15th, the purchase option clause has been exercised. Effective immediately, JSC Holdings is the sole owner of the property located at address. As per contractual agreements, the current occupants will be considered month-to-month tenants, subject to rental agreements moving forward. Failure to adhere to rental terms may result in eviction proceedings. I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. This was it. I had all the power now. I didn't need to call them. They would come to me. At 9:42 a.m., my phone rang. Mom. I let it go to voicemail. At 9:47 a.m., she called again. At 9:50 a.m., it was my father. I let them sweat for a full hour before I finally answered. Emily. My mother's voice was frantic, high-pitched. There's been some kind of mistake with the bank. We just got a notice saying we've defaulted on the mortgage, but that can't be right. You have to help us. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile creeping onto my face. It's not a mistake. Silence. What? My mother's voice dropped to a whisper. I said, it's not a mistake. I repeated slowly, making sure every word sank in. You didn't pay your mortgage, so the house. It's not yours anymore. A stunned pause, then her voice cracked. Emily, sweetheart, what are you talking about? This is our house. I tilted my head, savoring the moment. No, Mom, it was your house. But the second you defaulted, JSC Holdings took full ownership. Legally, you're tenants now. The weight of my words finally landed. No, that's impossible. My father's voice cut in, authority cracking with panic. The mortgage is with the bank. We've been paying it for years. I let that hang in the air before I dropped the final bomb. You weren't paying the bank, Dad. You were paying me. Dead silence. You're lying. My father's voice was low, sharp, but I could hear the fear creeping into his tone. I sighed. No, I'm not. 6 years ago, when you almost lost this house, I bought the mortgage. You've been sending your payments to JSC Holdings every month, thinking it was the bank. But it's my company. I paused, letting the truth sink in. I own this house. I always have. My mother's breath hitched. My father cursed under his breath. And then, my brother Ethan, who had clearly been listening in, burst into laughter. You mean to tell me we've been paying rent to our own failure of a sister this whole time? He scoffed. Well, I guess that explains why the bank's such a mess. You probably screwed up the paperwork, just like you screw up everything else. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. Ethan had always been this way. Arrogant, cruel, entitled. Well, since you seem to think I screw everything up, I said smoothly, you're going to love this part. Rent is due in 30 days, and if you can't pay, you'll be evicted. Emily, wait, my mother started, but my father cut her off. This is a bluff, he snapped. You wouldn't do this to your own family. I let out a short laugh. Wouldn't I? I thought about the years I'd spent covering for them, the thousands upon thousands of dollars I had poured into keeping them comfortable while they belittled me behind my back. I thought about my father's voice during that phone call. She's a mistake that should have never happened. I thought about how they had planned to blackmail me, ruin my career, and steal from me if I didn't hand over more money. My father had always seen me as weak. He was about to realize just how wrong he was. I've already spoken to my lawyer, I said, voice even. If you don't pay, you're out, and if you try anything, any manipulation, threats, or damage to the house, I will press charges. You ungrateful little... My father began, but I hung up before he could finish. Within moments, my phone buzzed, notifications lighting up with messages. Mom. Emily, please don't do this. We're family. Let's talk. Dad. You'll regret this. Mark my words. Ethan. You think you're so smart? You're just a bitter, pathetic loser. We'll take the house back. Just watch. I read each one and then blocked their numbers. I had spent my entire life trying to please them, always bending over backward for their approval. But that was over. I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window, letting the weight of it all wash over me. For the first time in years, I wasn't holding them up anymore. They were finally going to have to stand on their own 2 feet, and if they fell, that was their problem, not mine. The following days were unsettlingly quiet. No calls, no texts, no frantic pleas. I half expected my mother to appear at my door, crying and begging for forgiveness. I anticipated my father's rage, his attempt to intimidate me into reversing my decision. I expected my brother to search for a loophole that would allow them to keep the house. But none of that happened. Instead, they went quiet. I knew exactly why. They weren't ready to accept their fate. They were plotting their next move. The attempt came 3 days later, on a Wednesday morning. I was at work when an unknown number flashed on my phone. I ignored it. A minute later, another call came through, followed by an email with the subject: Urgent, home foreclosure mistake from law offices. I opened it. Dear Miss Carter, we have been contacted by your parents, Michael and Susan Carter, regarding the recent foreclosure of their home. They believe there has been a misunderstanding and would like to discuss the possibility of reinstating ownership. Please contact us at your earliest convenience to avoid further legal complications. Sincerely, John R. Hastings, Esquire. A smirk curled on my lips. Of course they'd hired a lawyer. I forwarded the email to David, my financial advisor. Less than 10 minutes later, he called me back, chuckling. They don't have a case, he said. They signed the mortgage contract, the purchase option clause, everything. They can't fight this in court because, legally, you're in the right. I exhaled, relieved but not surprised. I figured as much, but they won't stop, will they? David laughed. Probably not, but there's nothing they can do. I thought about my father, the pride, the arrogance. He would rather destroy everything than admit he had failed. No, they wouldn't stop. They'd keep pushing until they had nothing left to cling to. That evening, as I was finishing dinner, my phone rang. Uncle Ray. I picked it up immediately. Hey, Uncle Ray, I said. I just got off the phone with your father, he said, his voice tense. You need to be careful. I frowned. What now? He's not just trying to fight this legally, Ray continued, his tone lowering. He's looking for other ways to make you cave. A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean? He's calling your job, trying to get you fired. My stomach dropped. Are you serious? Ray sighed heavily. He told me, word for word, that if you won't give them back the house willingly, he'll ruin you in another way. He said something about contacting HR, making up a complaint, trying to frame you for fraud, anything to get you out of the picture. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply. Of course, he would. Faced with his own failures, my father would rather burn everything down than admit defeat. But now, he wasn't just after the house. He was after me. I wasn't about to sit back and wait for him to make his move. The next morning, I walked straight into HR. Emily, my manager Samantha greeted me with a smile. What's up? I forced a tight smile. I need to talk to you about something important, in private. She led me into her office and shut the door behind her. I took a deep breath. I need to give you a heads up, I began. My father, he's going to try and get me fired. Samantha's brows furrowed. What? I explained everything. How I had bought the mortgage, the default, the threats. When I finished, she let out a long breath and shook her head. Emily, let me be clear, she said, her voice firm. You are not going anywhere. Relief flooded through me. We deal with stuff like this more often than you'd think, she continued. Family drama, false reports, grudges. If your father calls, we'll document everything. But I promise you, he doesn't have the power to touch your job. She gave me a reassuring smile. I'll notify our legal team, just in case. If he steps out of line, we'll hit him with a cease and desist. I exhaled, the tension I didn't realize I'd been carrying leaving my body. My father had lost his house, and now he had lost his power over me too. That night, it happened. A knock at my door, urgent, hard. I knew before I even opened it who it was. I swung the door open, and there they were, my parents. My father stood stiff, his face flushed with fury. My mother's eyes were red and swollen from crying. Emily, she whispered, voice breaking. Please. I folded my arms, standing firm. What do you want? We need the house back, my father said, his voice low and threatening. You have no right to do this to us. I tilted my head, unimpressed. I have every right, legally, financially, morally. My mother clasped her hands together, desperation in her voice. We raised you. We gave you everything. You're punishing us for what? I cut her off sharply. For calling me a failure. For saying I was a mistake. For trying to ruin my life the moment I stopped supporting you." Her face tightened, and she flinched. My father's jaw tightened in a slow, controlled way. "You're being cruel," he spat, his voice raw with anger. I let out a short, humorless laugh. "No, Dad," I said, my voice even and steady. "I'm being fair." A thick, tense silence fell between us, hanging heavy in the air. Then my father's eyes darkened, his lips curling into a sneer. "You'll regret this, Emily. You think you're winning, but you're not. You'll never be anything without us, and one day you'll realize that." Something inside me clicked into place, and the last shard of hope I'd held onto, the belief that he could ever change, shattered completely. I met his gaze, unflinching. "Then I guess we'll see, won't we?" Without another word, I slammed the door in their faces, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely free. The second that door clicked shut, I knew I was done, not just with their manipulation, not just with their entitlement, but with them, completely. I stood there for a long time, gripping the doorknob as if it were the last tether to a life that no longer had a hold on me. My heart hammered in my chest. I had spent years trying to earn my father's respect, years hoping for a moment where he would look at me and finally see someone worth being proud of. But in that instant, with his threat still echoing in my mind, I realized something that should have been obvious all along. No matter how hard I tried, it would never be enough for them. And I didn't need it to be. The next morning, I sent the final notice. Subject: Notice to vacate property number 12. From JSC Holdings Legal Department. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Carter, as previously communicated, the mortgage agreement for the property located at address is no longer valid due to non-payment. As of today, your tenancy has been terminated. You are required to vacate the premises within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in formal eviction proceedings. Please ensure all personal property is removed before the deadline to avoid legal complications. Sincerely, Emily Carter, owner JSC Holdings. I stared at the email for what felt like an eternity before I clicked send. This was it. They were out of my life. The fallout began quickly. My mother called me 27 times that day. I didn't answer. My father left a single voicemail. "You'll regret this one day. You'll come crawling back, and when you do, we won't be here." I listened to the voicemail twice before deleting it. Ethan, my brother, sent one last message in desperation. "Congrats, Emily. You just ruined our family. I hope you're proud of yourself." I didn't respond. They had spent years making me feel like I was the problem, like I was never enough, like I should be grateful just to exist in their world. But now, they were the ones without a home, and I was finally free. 30 days passed. I didn't go to the house, didn't check in, didn't offer to help. I didn't need to. David took care of everything. He confirmed that they moved out just before the deadline, likely to save face and avoid the embarrassment of formal eviction. The house was mostly intact, though they took what they could carry and left the rest in piles of garbage. Typical. I drove there one last time, just to see it. The house stood silent, vacant. The place I had once cherished, the place where I grew up, was now mine alone. But as I stood in the doorway, staring at the empty rooms, I felt nothing. No sadness, no guilt, no nostalgia, just relief. I pulled out my phone and dialed Uncle Ray. "They're gone," I said simply. He exhaled on the other end. "How do you feel?" I thought about it for a moment, then smiled. Lighter. I sold the house 2 weeks later. The market was strong, and within days, the house was off my hands. The profits from the sale went towards starting a fund for young women escaping financially abusive families. Women like me, who had been made to feel indebted to their families just for existing. I knew how it felt to be trapped, to feel like love had to be earned. But I had learned something powerful through all of this. Real family isn't determined by blood. It's determined by who truly stands by you. And my real family? It wasn't them. It was me. 3 months later, a message popped up in my inbox. It was from my mother. Mom. "Emily, please. Please, I don't know where else to go. Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time. A few months ago, I would have agonized over this. I would have questioned whether I was making the right choice, whether I was being too harsh, too cruel. But now? I deleted the message without hesitation. Some bridges are meant to be burned. And I wasn't looking back.